Welcome back to the channel. We haven't done this in a while with new strategy breakdowns. We've talked about a lot in the past: sub 2, seller finance, wrap, hybrid, lease option. We've done a lot, but this stack method is perhaps the most powerful strategy to date. The most powerful strategy to date. And so what this involves is it's kind of a hybrid of a seller finance, or it's kind of a hybrid like the way that you take over someone's mortgage sub 2 with a seller finance, except you're gonna go to the bank and get a new loan to give the seller a down payment and then have the seller carry the remaining amount. And we'll show you how we structure these deals, or how I like to structure these deals, using a method called preferred equity. And we'll just walk through an example of a real deal that we're actually working right now, so you can kind of see the mechanics of how this deal works, what the benefits are to the buyer, what the benefits are to the seller. Kind of easy to see, a larger down payment. We'll go through all of it so you guys can understand how this concept works. And then if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comment section below. Walk through a real example of what a stack method is, how it's structured, and what the benefits are to both parties. We have an example going on. You're gonna see next week in detail, if you stay tuned for the next video, about how this structure is working in real time and what the exit strategy looks like. But just to isolate the stack method component of what's happening there, we'll use that as an example. The lady wants, or the seller wants, a $350,000 purchase price for the property. Her biggest need is she needs to go and pay some other debts with the money that she is able to acquire at closing or get at closing. And she really wants this $350,000 purchase price. The only problem is the property for a cash price, it needs some work. The property for a cash price isn't anywhere near worth that $350,000 valuation or her ask. So a cash offer is way lower than that. On a traditional seller finance, she needs about 20% down, or 30% down to cover her costs and work on top of that. So if we bring 30% to the table, that's a little bit too much for us to feel comfortable with out of our pocket in one deal plus rehab. If we borrow the money on a traditional seller finance, borrowing the money from somebody else as a private money lender to rehab the property and pay the down payment, is gonna be anywhere from 8 to 12% interest only. So what this method allows us to do, as you'll see, is essentially borrow that money from the bank and not have the obligation to pay that back immediately, because you're borrowing it from the bank at a fixed interest rate on a 30-year amortization. Doesn't get better than that. The seller in this situation needs $100,000 down, so just under like 30%. So she needs this $100,000. This $350,000 is her total purchase price. What we did is we said, okay, seller, we're gonna go to the bank and get a DSCR loan for 60% loan to value. So 60% loan to value of that $350,000 total price. We're gonna go borrow $210K from the bank. So far, we've borrowed $210,000 from the bank. We know the seller needs $100,000. We're gonna go ahead, we're gonna give the seller $100,000 out of that $210,000 that we borrow from the bank. So we're gonna be left with $110,000. We're gonna put this section on pause and complete this section over here where we show you how the deal stacks. So remember, the debt that we're borrowing from the bank is $210,000. Now we paid the seller $100,000, that leaves us with $250,000 that we owe the seller. So how do we protect the seller? How do we structure a seller position to where that money is protected as a seller finance type of scenario? The way that we like to do it is called preferred equity. And what that means is the seller gets a limited partnership in the purchasing LLC for the property that we're buying. She gets a limited partnership percentage in the LLC that we're acquiring the property with, and that $250,000 that we owe her is essentially a lien or a loan to the LLC that she is a part of. So that $250,000 is preferred equity. That's essentially a position against the LLC. So the total debt stack for this deal is $460,000. Now remember, we agreed to pay the seller $350,000. We owe $460,000 in total debt on this property. Here is the stack. Keep this in the back of your brain here. The $100,000 went to the seller out of the $210,000, which leaves us with $110,000 left over. After we pay closing costs, we're left with $79,000. That $79,000 is net in our pocket at closing money. And just to tie it around for you guys, what we said in the beginning of the video, we want to borrow money from the bank because it's a lower interest rate and a longer term, so that we can reinvest that money back into the property to increase its value and to turn it into, this property in particular, a co-living property. So we're gonna use that $79K to maximize the property's potential, but we're gonna borrow it for 30 years at 6.575% from the bank instead of going and getting it from a private money lender at 8 to 12% interest only for 2 years. That puts us in a really good position. Now, the property's worth $350,000 as is, and you have to get an appraisal to determine that the bank is willing to lend based on that value. In this case, they were, because it's a DSCR loan, which is asset-based. They're looking at the property through, hey, it's got all of these CapEx, these major items have all been replaced recently. We see the property's value, you just have to do some cosmetic work to it. Now, this is not a property that someone's gonna go get FHA or VA financing for in its current condition. It needs a lot of work, $20,000 to $30,000 worth of work to get to that point. But we were able to get an appraisal to come back at $350,000, so we can borrow that money from the bank, so we can net that amount of money. The seller can make her 100 grand, and we can reinvest a lot of that money back into the property. Now, the seller's $250,000, remember we talked about the preferred equity, she is owed that $250,000 in 15 years, 0% interest, and no payments. That buys us a ton of time for the property to appreciate and our loan that we borrowed from the bank to amortize, so that we can put ourselves in a position that in 15 years, we can refinance the property and cash out the seller and reposition the underlying debt on the property. Last component to this deal that makes it super duper powerful is once we put that money or a lot of that money back into the property, it's gonna be worth $430K today. And we only owe $460K in bank debt and business debt. So right now we only have a $30,000 spread that we have to make up, and 15 years to do that, while we cash flow the property in the meantime and have a great stabilized asset that we can control, that we have reserves that we can reinvest into. The seller gets what she needs, we get what we need at a cheaper price so that we can reinvest into the property, make it a better asset, and everybody in this situation wins. If you enjoyed this video, if you think this strategy might be useful for your business, if you want to learn how to pull money out of deals at closing like this, then stay tuned for the next video and future videos where we break this down more, as you can add it as a tool in your acquisitions arsenal. If you want to learn more about this, you can also go to our website, HouseAble.com. We'll link it for you below. Over there, you can kind of engage with what we're doing, submit deals to us that we could take a look at those deals for you, walk you through them, JV on them with you, potentially buy them from you, all the above. So if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, hit the subscribe bell for future videos, comment below. I'm excited to see your thoughts. Stay tuned for next week, and we'll see you on the next video.